and welcome back to Building a Modern Employer Brand podcast. In this podcast episode, I have something really special for you. I have Suzy Welch with me, and we're going to go heart to heart about this thing called life and how we can get it all a successful career, a loving family, and fulfillment, and lose those fears that we often use to build blocks between our hopes and desires for our lives and careers. If you don't know Suzy, she's a professor of management at NYU Stern School of Business, where she teaches 2 classes, how to be a great boss and becoming you. Suzy is also an author and a writer by trade. She has had a career in journalism and has been a reporter on TV. But she tells me that one of her highlights in her career was helping start and run a music tech company called Quadio that she recently sold. And if this wasn't a lot, she's also a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal. In this episode, you'll get to hear also our funny backstory on how we met and became friends 10 years ago, what Suzy has in common with my lady Finland and designer Alvar Aalto, and who connected us in the first place. And for those who are new to my podcast and have absolutely no idea who I am, my name is Susanna Rantanen. I developed the employer brand marketing industry in my native Finland, I would say, I claim. And my husband and I own the only Finnish employer branding agency that has been listed as one of the top 10 employee branding agencies in Europe, which we're very proud of. And in addition to us helping businesses to overcome the challenge of getting and retaining the talents they need, I'm a podcaster, author, keynote speaker, and I teach communication and marketing online for both in-house and freelancing recruiting and employer branding professionals and career coaches. So, ready to get started with today's episode. Hello, Suzy. How are you?
Hello, Suzy. How are you? I'm great. I'm happy to be talking to you.
Yes, me too. This was, I've been thinking about it for a while that I wanted to have you on my podcast, but then I didn't have like an idea of the topic that we would talk about. And then when you posted a while back ago that you were going to have a keynote somewhere, which I've already forgotten, I was like, that topic sounds amazing. And then that's when I asked you, could you come to my podcast? Could you be my guest?
Yeah.
You graciously said yes. Here you are. So obviously my podcast audience knows that I never have guests. Actually, I've only ever had one guest. And guess what? Her name was Susanna as well. So it seems to be that
there's a pattern developing.
There is a pattern. So if you want to be a guest on my podcast, you need to be a Suzy. So do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Suzy Welch, and I am professor of management at NYU Stern School of Business. I teach 2 classes. I teach the class on how to be a great boss, a big class, and I teach because it's business school, right? And then I teach a class, an elective, which has become quite popular, called Becoming You, how to craft the authentic life you want and need. And it presents a methodology to discover what you should really be doing when you grow up. And it's a methodology that I've worked on for many years as a observer of business and a writer about business, and actually a businesswoman myself. I serve on corporate boards, but I've also run companies. And I have for many years had a career in broadcast journalism. I was a reporter on TV. But I would say in many ways, one of the highlights of my career was helping start and run a music tech company called Quadio that I recently sold. So I've kind of come at business in all different ways. And I find myself finally in the classroom teaching it. And I'm kind of loving it because, when you teach, you learn because your students are teaching you. And so that is very much happening with. I'm also actually a frequent contributor to the Wall Street Journal, where what I really end up writing about is what my students are teaching me. because I teach mainly Gen Z, obviously,
Yeah.
these young 20 somethings. And so I am learning a lot from them about the way they see the world and how different it is from how we see the world.
So I was thinking about like the things that we have in common, in addition to obviously our names, but you and I both have this crazy love for dogs, don't we?
Yes.
And like I spend most of my time on Instagram watching dog videos
My
and
entire
sending
feed.
them to my sister.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that I had to screw loose. If you look at my Instagram feed, it's just completely dogs. Like there's no humans.
Yeah,
All they feed me are dogs because
exactly.
obviously all I'm consuming is dogs. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
Then I know that you love art, which I do too. You are a really
Mhm.
knowledgeable art lover, whereas I'm not that much. I just go with like, I like this, it speaks to
Yeah.
me, and that's it. but yeah, it was funny because you say on your website that you are a Libra, but people tell you that you act like a Virgo, whereas I am a Virgo.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we share the fondness for the man who connected us, your late
Yes.
husband, Jack. Let's share the story because it was crazy, and that was your first and only time in Finland, right?
It wasn't my first time in Finland. I'm probably the only
Oh,
American you'll meet who's been to Finland 11 times. But I had been to Finland
11 times.
before with Jack. Yeah, because I have this bizarre close connection with Finland in that my dad, before I was born, was a Fulbright
Yeah.
scholar in Finland. And so he and my mom lived in Finland for 2 or 3 years and made a pack of Finnish friends.
No
Because my
way.
dad was an architect and studying Alvar Aalto, and my mom was a ceramicist, and she um, found herself in the middle of the very talented, robust Finnish pottery community. And so they stayed, and then they extended their stay, and actually then went and lived for a brief period of time also in Copenhagen. And when I grew up,
Wow.
and then they moved back to New York when my older sister was born and my dad started to work again in the United States. I grew up every Christmas with my Christmas tree strung with Finnish and Danish flags. And so my curiosity about Finland and Denmark, with all these unbelievable stories and photos my parents brought home and I was raised with, was gigantic. And while other little American children were sort of fascinated by sort of standard France and Spain kind of thing, I was like all about Finland and Denmark and both of those two countries. And so as early as I could, I started going to Finland. And then when Jack and I started traveling a lot for business and for speeches and consulting, we always gravitated towards Scandinavia. So I've been again, but it was my first time that we met. It was the first time I was in Yaroslava, which is where
Yeah.
the Nordic Business Forum was that year. And I, of
Yeah.
course, like
Yeah.
most travelers, spent my time in Helsinki. So this was my first
Yeah.
time out of Helsinki, and I was just blown away by the beauty.
Yeah, it's Jyväskylä is a really growing. It has grown a lot because it's a university city, and that was 10 years ago when we met. So it was smaller and kind of, but it's beautiful. It's like sort of center of Finland. We have all the lakes there. The city is by a lake, and it's gorgeous. So we met in an elevator. Some people have elevator pitches, and I just
Yes,
went like,
indeed.
I was so starstruck
Yeah.
because I had, it was in 2004 when I started in my first HR job. And it was like a total accident to me ending up in HR. It wasn't something I ever planned for myself, but I just found myself there, and it became my career. And I had only been in that job for a couple of months, summer holiday, and I was like looking for how can I learn more about like what this HR is about, and I don't even remember how I came up with Jack's book. And I just like, we were at our summer house and I was just like reading through it. Like I couldn't put it down. And I was like writing notes everywhere and just like literally like, it made so much sense to me. So obviously when I heard that Jack was coming to talk to this Nordic Business Forum, obviously I was like, I'm so going to be there. And I had the book with me, even though I didn't think that I would ever get to meet him and you. But then what happens? You are staying at the same hostel as I was with my friend, also called Susanna. And we kind of walk into the elevator and there you are. And it's a tiny elevator. And I was just like I couldn't say anything. And my friend was going like, say something, because she knew I was like totally like and I was just like, I don't know what to say. Smile. I think I said something, but I have absolutely no recollection of what I said. Probably something stupid, but yeah. And then they were
I think your
like,
face said it all, though. Your face said it all. You wanted to meet Jack. That was so obvious.
Yeah, yeah. I was just like, and yeah. Then during the business forum, I kept like bumping into you, and I just felt like you're gonna think that I'm like some like crazy stalker or something, and I was just like, this is getting so embarrassing. And then one morning we were at the breakfast at the same time, you and Jack and us, me and my friend, and then she said to me like, oh, now go get the book, you need to have it autographed and you need to have a picture of you with Jack. And I'm just like, no, it's so embarrassing, I can't. And then I just went into, and she kind of literally pushed me like, you go, you'll never get this opportunity again. And yeah, that's how we met. And then you had a lovely speech there as well. It was the 3 times 10.
I wrote a book about decision making called 10-10-10. At the time I was working for Oprah.
Yeah.
You might have heard of her. And I was a columnist for her magazine, and I wrote about a decision making tool that I used because I have 4 children, and when they were all young and I was working full time, my life was kind of a hot mess, and I finally got it under control using this device. And I wrote a book about it. After I wrote a column about it that was very popular, I wrote a book about it. And so I think I spoke there also. And then in an event that I'll never, ever forget as long as I live, it was my birthday and somebody got wind of it. And the audience sang happy birthday to me. And it was a big audience. I mean, I think it was 10,000 people or more. And everybody sang happy birthday. I was absolutely just blown away in a way that would never, and made me an even bigger fan of Scandinavia than I had been before, which is hard to imagine, but I loved it. It was beautiful. It was so kind. It was just a very beautiful thing to do.
You two just made such a lasting impression, I think, for everyone.
It was, Jack and I have spoke it literally hundreds and hundreds of events, and it was what we were doing in those days. That one always was one of our favorites. I mean, it was really the warmth of the people, the intellectual curiosity of the people, and meeting people like you, frankly. I mean, it was fun talking to you. And then, there's a lot of bad things about social media, but social media is what enabled us to stay in touch, because then I think,
yes.
we followed each other right away, like on Instagram. And then we were able to kind of watch people's our lives unfold. I was able to ask you about your kid growing, and he was growing up, and you watched my children grow up, and it was sort of neat.
I agree that there is so many things that are not that great about social media, but literally having been able to stay friends and stay in connection with you and with I was an exchange student in Illinois back in the days when I was young, and I don't think I would have been able to stay in touch with all the friends I made there without social media, and also keep up with their lives and so on. So it's been a real blessing. I think that makes a good jump from your 10-10-10, because that was about you kind of juggling with your career, wanting to have a career, wanting to obviously be a great mom and struggling with those decisions that us women have
Right.
when we, that's all right,
Yeah.
when we are both, wanting to do something for ourselves and have that kind of a need to use our sort of own intellectual property and yet be moms. And there's so many, I think, so many women in HR. HR is a kind of a, I think, profession where people who end up in HR are, they have a lot of empathy for others and they're very kind and caring and nurturing and so on. And sometimes maybe too kind and caring and too put else's needs beyond their own. And I think a lot of HR people, whether you're working like HR with HR processes or talent acquisition or employer branding, which are obviously my niche these days, you're always like, everybody's always asking so much from you. But what about you? What about you, building your career? And I know that we spoke about how like the world is quite crazy right now and a lot of companies are laying off people. And, the job of a person who is working in talent acquisition is kind of those that we've seen already during COVID, that a lot of recruitment people were just like laid off immediately. And then, it's so you have to be, as a talent acquisition person, you have to be prepared also to take control of your career so that you're not so dependent on companies like letting you go off as the first person when the bad times hit, because I think there's going to be more bad times coming in the future. So from the 10 to what you're doing these days, which is obviously those classes that you mentioned. So I think it's a good sort of shift into talking about how to figure out this thing and how to get the life you want, get the fulfillment, overcome those fears of, being a bad mom if you want a career, or if you want a career, then, can you have children or so? So tell me how you've done it, because you're really successful. And I know that your kids adore you. You've even worked with them. So
Well, let me start by saying that what you described is kind of the gold ring, right? That you would be able to be a mom, be a partner if you've got one, and be great at work. And I would say that it's not uncommon for people to say to me, "Well, you did it," and I want to say that maybe it looks that way, but I had the same amount of blood, sweat, and tears as anyone else. There were incredibly hard days. I had kids go off the rails. I had a lot of ugly cries. I made a lot of mistakes at work in the process. And so I would say, and none of us ever get it completely right. I didn't get it completely right. I still work on it every single day. I was very lucky in many ways in that I had an incredibly good partner in my husband. He co-parented with me. And so in that way, I had the wind at my back because I had a partner, and that is not always the case. And if you're doing it alone, it's twice as hard, and maybe 10 times as hard. And I would also say I was really helped by this thing that is very kind of hard to talk about, which is that my kids were squares. Like I was very kind of lucky that they were nerdy, and I didn't have kids who were risk takers. And so I have a lot of wonderful friends who are fantastic parents, but the kids have got a certain makeup, and the kids are daring, they're risk takers, they're artists, and they've made their parents' lives immeasurably harder. And maybe those kids will grow up to be very interesting, fabulous adults, but they brought their parents over the hot coals because they did things. And my kids just were quite square and nerdy. Like when they get together, they play cards with each other. And I mean, my friends look at me like, well, your children are just like squares. And I was like, yeah, I'm kind of a square. And they would tell you, if you ask my kids about this, they would say, well, we were terrified of you and that was what was going on. And we were just scared to death of you. And I am Sicilian by heritage. And and some of that comes out in my child rearing, in that I never bargained or negotiated with my kids. I was like really the law. I mean, if they got any kind of give on rules or anything like that, it was always from Jack. Jack was kind of squishy like a grape. And And I was quite. So I would say this is a long way of saying I'm not an authority on this, but I am a fellow traveler. And one of the
Yeah,
things that
that's
I've
a good way to
always
put it. Yeah.
strived for my whole life, okay, it's hard. It's hard. Okay, but everything good is hard. It's hard to be a great mom and good at work.
Yeah.
No generation's ever tried
Yeah.
to do it before. And so we're the first, couple of generations to try it. And it's every single day is hard, but it has great joy. And I was a mom who, at a certain point, didn't have to work anymore, and because I
Mm-hmm.
was married to somebody who made that possible. But I chose to keep
Mm-hmm.
working, and therefore I had to turn to my kids and say, "Yes, I could be home with you all the time, but guess what? I actually choose to go back. I want to go to work." And they hated that decision. They wanted me to be home like other moms, like my sisters stayed home with their kids, their cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to do this very hard thing where I had to sit down with my kids and say, for everyone's mental health, but especially mine, I'm going to stay at work. Because one day you will
Mm-hmm.
grow up and you will leave, but I will still be here, and I am not going to sacrifice my identity for yours. And hopefully we will all come out of this with our own identities. And this was a brutally hard conversation that changed everything, because my kids had to come to terms with the fact that I was choosing to work. So, but along the way, one of the things that I was bad at that I wanted to get much better at was having a more deliberate life. Like, what I didn't like all the time and what really screwed up my life was when I was very reactive, when I was always just sort of letting life happen to me. And 10 10 10, that book, was about a
Mm-hmm.
decision-making process that helps you make your decisions proactively so that the decisions don't get made by your lack of decision making. Okay, that momentum takes over and a decision
Mm-hmm.
gets made by accident. And then Becoming You became an outgrowth of that, because Becoming You is this curriculum that I teach about deciding what you really want to do with your life, based not on the factors that usually determine what you do with your life. So here's what usually determines what you do
Mm-hmm.
with your days: expedience, momentum, the people around you who you love, optics, in other words, what other people think of you, and the drive for financial security. Okay. And instead, I thought, what if, what ends up happening when you let expedience, momentum, optics, other people, and financial security drive what is happening to your life, and you end up waking up at age 40 or 50 or maybe even 60, and you say, what the heck? Who stole my life? This is not what I want. And this is what you see
Yeah.
midlife crisis. When you see people leaving marriages because they're like, I can't take any of it. This is when you see people having mental health crises because they've actually ended up with a life that was not of their own desire or design. And so my question for myself was, what's the way out? And I developed a construct called the area of destiny, which is this construct that suggests that the place that you should live your life is in this very beautiful piece of real estate that exists at the intersection of your most deeply held personal values, what you truly believe in, how you want to live, the things that matter to you, that bring you joy, that make you feel like the most authentic version of yourself. So hold that thought in your head about that's one sort of the thing that you've got to straighten out is, what are my values? The second sphere is what you're actually good at. Because a lot of us end up doing stuff that we're not writing with our dominant hand. We are somewhat good at it,
Yeah.
and we're doing it because of all those reasons I mentioned. But all of us have inborn skills and aptitudes and gifts, and some people are good at a lot of things, and so they choose some subset of them that is not actually what they're best at. So hold that as a second thought: is the identifying what you are truly good at. And then the third is the areas of the economy or of work that call you intellectually or emotionally, and that I would suggest also would be growing. I don't want to suggest anybody go
Mm-hmm.
into an area of work that is not growing, because growth is the elixir of life. So I thought, okay, here's this construct, area of destiny. If you could possibly find a career or a vocation at the intersection of your true values, your core competencies, and the work that fascinates you and moves you, that would be your area of destiny. And I started to look around at people who were incredibly happy and fulfilled. And then I sort of backed out were they at this place? Were they living their values, their competencies, and in the work? And it was always the case. Yes, this is a very obvious construct in some ways. Anybody who's happy is probably in their area of destiny. 99% of the people who are really happy and fulfilled are in their area of destiny. And I thought, well, what if it wasn't in the rearview mirror? What if we actually tried to identify our area of destiny through a rigorous methodology of searching and analytics and tools? What if I could develop that and I could get an understanding of where the economy is going? And so that's how I developed the curriculum that I teach now. And I'm
Yeah.
teaching it to 20 somethings, but come this fall, I'm actually also teaching it to executive MBAs, people in their 30s and 40s, because it's never too late to try to discover this, this process. So, or to go through this process. So
That's so interesting, because if I think about myself in my 20s, and then I compare it to, I'm going to be 48 in a couple of weeks, and I'm not sure if I feel that I have so much more like mileage, that I'm more able to, with the experience, I'm more able to understand of what worked for me and what didn't work for me, and use that information like going forward. So it's really, I mean, I don't think that I would have been able to, because when I graduated and was in my 20s, I thought I knew everything. I thought
yeah,
I was like literally
yeah.
like, I am coming from university and I'm going to tell you how to do this. So I think it's really interesting that I'm literally like mortified now when I think of like how I was so like full of this idea that just because I read something in a book and made an essay
Yeah,
about it,
yeah.
that made me qualified to like talk to somebody about it. But I find it really interesting that the becoming you, that it actually helps people in their 20s, because it's like, what a revelation if I had all the sort of the wisdom, well, in the form of a tool, and like somebody to help me understand and kind of look into the crystal ball. I mean, it would have been great to have this life much earlier than I have now. I don't
Right.
know. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I think that I just have one caveat, which is I say to my students that, you're gonna, life gets in the way. Okay. Somebody gets sick. You get fired. There's a pandemic. And so this is not foolproof. I mean, it's not a silver bullet because things happen, but I'd also say that it saves you two or three or four boneheaded mistakes, because you're about to take a job and then you say, oh, wait, let me just revisit that area of destiny analysis. In fact, I had a student who took the class and he was marching off to a certain career. And then a job was offered to him. And the thing that he liked about the job was the fact that it was closer to his house and his wife was about to have a baby. And he said, I think I'm going to take it. And I said, let us just go over your area of destiny again. And the job was so far away from his area of destiny. And I said, what are you thinking? And he said, I'm thinking I was about to make a boneheaded mistake. Thank you for preventing it. So it doesn't, it definitely is helpful, but sometimes we have to make the mistakes we make, and we learn from them.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
does try to move the, oh, it all makes sense in the rear view mirror. It tries to move it to the, out the front window, and help you a bit that way. And I have, I am very moved by the number of letters I get from students saying, I was just about to do the most ding dongy thing given my actual values and my actual interests. And I am appreciative that you gave me a way to think about it so that I didn't do that. And so
yeah.
that's the beauty of it. It prevents mistakes, and it kind of gives you a path to follow, although you are going to veer from that path because life happens.
When we think about like these recruiters, people working in talent acquisition, employer branding, and this becoming you and the area of destiny. Now, my audience is in a wonderful position, because not only can they sort of use this idea for themselves, but also for all of those job seekers, those candidates that they are talking to and interviewing, and sort
Yeah.
of helping them to understand and see, is this ideal workplace for you or not?
Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of it for the people who are an employer. Yeah.
Are you going to write a book about this, becoming you?
This is certainly a question that gets asked a lot, and I have mixed feelings about it because I could write about it, but it's really an interactive experience, right? It's a little like I could write about. I mean, and I've written and I've done plenty of videos about it and so forth, sort of trying to walk people through
Yeah,
it. But I have noticed the magic of it happens in person when I am doing it
right,
with people, or it's me, I've not seen
right.
it done with other people, but I've definitely seen, it would be possible for somebody else to facilitate this process. And I'm actually, to tell you the truth, more interested in sort of doing like kind of workshops on it, like having a kind of becoming you kind of conferences where we break out in groups and do it and that kind of thing. It's really kind of a live experience because you often learn a lot from the people you're doing it with. Like in my classroom
Yeah,
setting, I see my students push each other and ask each other questions and so forth. And I'm not, I think maybe a book is in the, I know my editor would like me to write a book about it. But I love it. And I'm actually recently just going into companies teaching it because, sort of word is kind of out about this. And two companies in New York City, two big banks have recently hired me to come in and do it with their teams. And I love that idea because I know that it's pretty hard to do this alone. It's pretty hard
yeah,
to be your own, to do the process and sort of moderate it on your own. It can be done, but
yeah.
I think it's really good to do it with others.
Yeah, you need the kind of a mirror also. And
Yeah.
even though I say that Miro is maybe my greatest teacher, especially as an employer, you're only kind of feeding yourself. You need the feedback from others as well and the perspectives from others as well. I like the idea of becoming new conferences and workshops and things like that. So I'm going to encourage you to to think about that, because we can't all be your students. We can't all get into Stern Business School and become your students. So
Right. I don't know the solution. I'm looking for a business partner to help me actually think about how I could do this and sort of
yeah,
expand the reach of the process. And I because I've seen it change lives, and that feels really great.
mm,
And so I don't. I this is a bit. If one of your wonderful listeners has an idea about how this could become a business, I would love to hear from them. And you can find me on LinkedIn, right? And tell me because my feeling is this is going to sound dreadful, but I can't build the plane and fly it at the same time. So I would like to figure out. So I need a partner, and I don't have that partner yet, to be honest. So I'm loving teaching about it, and I can't figure out a way to get it out there also. So I spent this morning working on a lecture for my class on how to become a great boss, and for me, that's where my skill and competency is. And so I'm kind of in my area of destiny when I'm creating the curriculum.
yeah,
And disseminating the curriculum is not a gift and skill. And so I think part of our life's work, and I'm sure it's true for your listeners as well, is
mm,
where we have holes, finding that partner or that team that makes the things possible. We cannot do it all on our own. We cannot. And so we need to collaborate.
yeah. I think that really resonates with me, because I am such a nerd and an introvert myself, that I often find myself trying to figure everything out on my own. And one of my friends, who is a also a professor at the Aalto University in Helsinki, and a very experienced businessman, and he's been telling me for years that you need to ask for help. Ask me to help you. I am
Right,
available. And
right.
I'm like, but I don't want to bother you. And I think it's so important, this, and that's something for me that I literally seem to be incapable of. I always think like, well, it's just me and my struggles, and I'm really timid of asking for help. And I think that's something that people definitely should, because it's true that you can get so much more done when you get people together and you learn from each other, and share it. It's an
Yeah.
important lesson. Tell me more about the how to be a better boss course, because obviously, I'm also a boss, and it's
Right.
something that I've always wanted to be, a really good boss. but I failed. I've succeeded, but I've also failed. So tell me your thoughts about that.
It's so hard. I mean, it's unbelievably hard. When I met Jack in 2001, he watched me being a boss. I was running an organization there, $100 million organization, Harvard Business Review. And he watched me be a boss briefly. And he said, "You are simply the worst boss I've ever seen in my life." I thought I was the best boss. I thought I was, because I want to make everyone happy.
Yeah.
And of course, that just made everybody be more of a baby. And I was very, I was terrible in every possible way.
Gosh,
And
that's me.
and he immediately told me, he identified that I was very, very hurt and miffed. And I would say, later in his life, 20 years later, he told me, I said to him, am I a good boss yet? And he said, "Well, you certainly get the prize for most improved, but you had a long way to go." And I think that I did become, if I may be so bold as to say, I became a better boss by making every possible mistake. And when I ran Quadio, the music tech startup, I often say that of the 100 mistakes a startup manager can make, I made 101 of them. I made every possible mistake, but I learned. And I think as bosses, the best thing we can do is just, every day strive to learn from our mistakes. It is
We'll
very
see. Yeah.
hard, and it's actually, I would make the case, getting harder to manage people, and that's what being a boss is. I mean, you also manage
Yeah.
processes and projects, but tell me you can do that without managing people? No, you cannot.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
my class is based on the premise that there is this ridiculous notion out there that management is one thing and leadership is another thing. And my belief is that if you're a leader who doesn't manage, you're a jerk. And if you're a manager who doesn't lead, you're a jerk. And so I use this term "lanager," which is a mixture of leadership and manager, because
I like that.
if managers, make the beds, and leaders dream about, what color the sheets should be, nothing gets done. Okay. And so, my class is about the blocking and tackling of being a manager, a leader manager. And the organization of the class is around what managers, or, well, we can call them managers because it's such a weird term, what they actually do, which is that they get the right people on the bus, to quote the great Jim Collins. They create the right team, they build the culture, and then I spend 3 weeks on making hard calls. Because at the end of the day, the bulk of what you do as a manager is you make hard calls. You make
Yeah.
important decisions with limited information. And I spend one of those lectures on managing hard people, because that's another thing that you spend a huge amount of time. So it's hard calls, which is making difficult decisions with limited information, and managing difficult people. Because what ends up happening, one thing you really discover very quickly as a boss, is that your top performers are not always your nicest people.
Yeah.
Your best
Yeah.
performers are not always the people who play the best with others. Okay. And
Yeah.
sometimes you have people who are marvelous team players, they collaborate, and they're just not your best performers. And so you have to have a strategy for dealing with that. That's reality. The day you get a star, the person who has got incredibly high performance and is also a marvelous human being, you just pour money on the head of that person until they can't even see, okay? Blinding them with bucks. Easier to do in the United States than other places. Okay. But,
Yeah.
but I would say that a lot of the times with people, you're just managing this very difficult reality. And with hard calls,
Yeah.
all the easy calls, they're easy. You got full information. You got two options. One is obviously better than the other. Fine. I don't need to teach people how to do that. So we do a lot of simulations with hard calls. And then I actually, in this class, also do a exercise where everybody gets a 360 evaluation from 22 people that they've worked for, 20 people they've worked with in the past, so they can understand themselves better. Because my belief is that you can't be a good boss and manage other people until you understand who you are. And too often people think that who they are is what they say. They believe that their personality is how they describe themselves. I think this is a terrible, sad thing that people do. They say, "Oh, I am this person. I'm honest. I'm candid. I'm kind. I'm generous." But in fact, the reality is your personality is not who you say you are. Your personality is how other people experience you.
That's right.
Okay, so I'll just tell a quick story. I had a student, she was working. She was coming to be an MBA part-time. And even though she was the top performer at her company, she couldn't get promoted. So she started coming to my office hours and she said, I just don't understand it. I have the top numbers. I've gone to my bosses 30 times. They will not promote me. They won't give me a bigger title. They won't give me more money. And I said, well, what's the reason? And she said, well, they say that I'm rude. They say that I'm blunt. Well, right around this time, and she said, I'm not. I'm honest. What's the wrong with these people? They're so thin-skinned. They can't take my honesty, but I'm trying to help the company with my honesty. So then right around that time, her 360 feedback came back, and you could see that every single person she worked with found her to unbelievable, off the charts levels of hostility. She was experienced as an
Wow.
incredibly hostile person. And I had to say to her, let's just pretend her name is Mary. I had to say to her,
Yeah.
look, Mary, your explanation of your personality is that you're candid and you're honest and you're moving the company forward because you've got the best intentions. Okay. And everyone experiences you as hostile. What are you? I want to break this news to you. You're hostile. That's how people experience you. It doesn't make any difference if you're telling yourself how nice you are. You're not nice. And she said to me, you're blowing my mind. You're changing my world. And I said, I want you to listen to yourself. I want you to take a month and I want you to try to be nicer. I want you to think only about how people are experiencing you. Okay. And, it sort of comes down to, you can tell your kids you love them. Okay. I love you. I love you. I
Yeah.
love you. But if you don't show love, it's just a word. And so I said,
Right. That's
if
right.
you think you're moving the company forward with your candor and your intentions are good, you're going to have to change your behaviors. And anyway, the happy ending to this story is 3 months later. It took longer than a month. 3 months later, she called me and she said, I was just promoted. And I said,
Wow.
why do you think that is? Why do you think that is,
Yeah.
Mary? And she said, okay, it pains me, but every day I go in and I'm nice. And I said, I'm sorry it pains you. Are you any less honest? And she said, no, but I'm saying it differently. And I said, okay.
Right.
So I would say to teach my students how to be better bosses, I have to teach them how the world experiences them. So we spend a couple of weeks on that. That's hard for some people because at the beginning of this process, they all do a self-assessment about how they think the world perceives them. And then they get back the results. I use a data analytical company in California that's very good and costs quite a bit of money. Thank you. NYU covers it, which is a very nice thing that they do. And then they get back the report on how the world experiences them. And this is a radical experience for many of these students. It's life-changing. And one of the good things is that I go through it with them. I put up my results. I show them how I thought I am, and and so at least they are seeing my pain also, because it's never perfect. So that's also what I teach. And then at the end, I have my students write manifestos about what kind of manager they want to be. It's very important this is the last thing I'll say. It's very important to know what kind of manager you want to be, to have an explicit and deliberate manifesto. I am this manager. I believe this, and this is the way I act. It's important for you to know that so that you're not
Yeah.
improvising, and it's important for people.
See, I believe in that so much, and that's what I've always told my employees, that there's a difference in between what I would like to be as a manager and then the reality of what I'm capable of. And some of my capabilities, or lack of, are because of the person that I am, and I can't change those. And
Yep.
some of them are because of the circumstances, and I'm unable to do something or be something or provide something because of the circumstances. It doesn't have anything to do with whether I want or not, but this is what it is. And we actually,
Yep.
when we've ever hired, we always tell also, like for example, in the job adverts and so on, we're always very specific about who this company is not for, who this is not ideal for, because I don't want to fool anyone. And in Finland, I have a reputation. People know me. I have quite a strong personal brand, and my business is quite well known. And I created
Yep.
something that didn't exist before. So we were the first company to do it. So there's a lot of people in this profession that kind of love the idea of working for me or my company. And I always have to like
Right.
be very specific, like what do we do? What do we not do? What kind of a person I am, what I'm capable of, and who this is not for. We can be friends,
Yeah.
and we can collaborate and stuff, and I think it's very important to be like brutally honest about it as a boss. And I think that if you are working in talent acquisition, you need to figure that from those managers that you're hiring for, like brutally honestly, like dig it out from them. Who are they ideal for as a manager and who are they not? Because we, at the end of the day, it's not really about the work that you're doing or the skills that you have. It's who you're doing it with. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or your boss is a bad person or the company is a bad company. It's just like, your stars are not aligned. You're better off apart. So
Yeah, no, this is a fantastic point that you're making. I think it's
yeah.
very, very true what you're saying.
Yeah, and I think we should talk about this more when we train people to become managers, when we promote them to become managers, that they do that kind of self-evaluation, or they are helped to do these assessments about who they are, so that they understand what they can provide others with and what they don't, what kind of experiences they are sort of giving as a manager. Because yeah, I mean, we're all just people, and we're not always
Yeah.
hunky-dory.
I mean, I think that this is why I love what you're saying. And if you're not careful, I'm going to come ask you to speak to my class. I mean, I think that this is, this idea to say, this is the kind of manager I am, and this is the kind of culture I have. And it is not for
Yeah,
everyone.
exactly.
These are our values. And if you don't have
Yeah,
these values, for instance, I have a value within my own organization of urgency. Of urgency. I'm
yeah,
an urgent
yeah,
person. I get things done right
yeah,
away. It's not only my personality, but I also think urgency matters for a lot of different
yeah,
reasons.
yeah,
And 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 I say to people during the interview process, if you don't feel urgent about work, and if you're going to think, oh, I wish I had longer for this, then you don't belong here. I
yeah.
move very fast, and it's painful to be around me for people who are ponderous.
That's right.
But go
Yeah,
work at a think tank, for God's sake. Just don't work with me.
and it's so true, because you want people to know that it's just the way we work here,
Yeah,
and if this is not comfortable for you, you're not going to feel at ease and feel like at home here. Whereas you deserve that. So you need to
yeah,
recognize this in yourself, and who do you want and what do you need. I mean, I also once had this talk with a girl who was working as a salesperson in my company for a very short time. And then I had to
yeah,
tell her, like, listen, like, you need a really hands-on manager to help you with your daily sales
yeah,
work. I am not that person. I can't help you. My lack of ability to help
right.
you in your work is making you miserable, and you are making me
Yes,
miserable,
yeah,
because I feel like I'm failing with you all the time. So, I
yeah,
mean, we're not good together. So
that's right.
you need
That's
to
right.
find a workplace, and when you go for your next job search, and if you're going to work as a sales manager, you need to ask your future potential boss, are you going to be there for me, because that's what I need, and take
Right.
that as a learning advice. So it's really important, I think, to have these conversations and really like understand how much more important this is than skills, because you can always learn skills, but if you don't know about yourself and what you need and what you can provide,
Hmm.
then it's
Hmm.
just like a road to misery.
It is.
Yeah,
It totally is. And I think it's so right I think the advice you gave that woman was brilliant, which is like, okay, we know this about you now. You need somebody who is sort of shoulder to shoulder with you. Go find that job
yeah,
and that manager. I mean, I
yeah,
myself, one of the hardest things I ever had to do was to teach people how to write. So I'm a writer by trade, and I do a ton of writing. But then when I became the editor of the Harvard Business Review, I had to teach or help people learn how to be better writers. I didn't really have that skill. I didn't have it. And and so I started doing everybody's work for them. I started to just do everybody's writing for them because it was just faster. It was more efficient. Instead of sort of teaching them how to be better, I would just take their pieces, and I was enervating everybody. I was making them all sad. They weren't able to do their work because I was doing it all for them. And I had a good enough boss who was able to say to me, you got to stop doing that, Susie. You got to get into their brains, and you got to sit there. And I had to kind of teach myself how to teach people to write. And at beginning, it was agonizing. Then I had a few test cases where it actually became gratifying. And then I was off to the races. And now I do that. But I have to constantly remind myself that even though it would be just so much easier for me to do all the writing myself, in the long run, that's very inefficient. So in the short run, it's super efficient, and I have to do the hard work. So I feel for you. And you've got to know what kind of boss you are to be a boss. You cannot, and getting the title doesn't make you a boss. Just like owning a piano does not make you a pianist, or having a baby doesn't make you a good mom. Okay. Being a boss, getting the title does not make you a good boss.
Yeah. I hope that managers are not promoting their best employees to become bosses just because they're best in their sort of day-to-day work. I would hope, it happens all the time, and it drives me crazy. I wish people would understand that becoming a boss is a service job. It's like you are there to enable others to shine. And if that's not your passion, if you don't want to become great in that area, then it's not your thing. Shine by yourself in what you're doing right now. But I have to say, because also the most of the work that we do is literally writing as well. And I have so done, that's what you're saying, like rewriting my employees' copy text and articles for them, because it's faster. And I've really had to be conscious about giving them advice, and not they're never going to learn if I rewrite it. And once a long time ago, one of my employees told me, Susanna, this is not my text anymore. This is your text. And I was like,
that's right.
That's very right. And
you're going to just,
And that was, I still feel really bad that I made her feel.
I know it.
Yeah. But it's life is a learning lesson. Yeah.
Right. Listen, I always say that every time you make a mistake, just file it under the Wisdom Project.
That's a good way to say it. Yeah. Oh, I've got a massive Wisdom project. It's so big that
I know. I do too. It's actually, it's you're not lying to yourself. You're not lying to yourself. I always say that the path to wisdom is paved with ugly cries. You make so many mistakes on the way to wisdom. And then, and once you have some kind of, I'm 63, so I kind of feel like I got some wisdom coming on, but it doesn't inure me from sometimes making mistakes. I still do it. I catch them earlier though. That's kind of the beauty of being older. Is you don't stop making mistakes. You catch them earlier.
That's true, because you're so more, you have especially if you've been kind of reflecting your behavior, and if you're assessing yourself regularly, like I am, trying to learn about myself and learn about my mistakes, you start to notice patterns in your behavior, and as you said, catch them early. Not necessarily always be able to avoid them, but then you're painfully aware that I'm going to screw up. Alrighty, we're coming to the end of our podcast episode time. I could talk to you forever. You're just such an inspiring person. You're
we have a mutual
you're someone
fan
I
club.
look up to.
Oh, same. Same. I really look up to you. I love and admire you, and I think what you've done with your business and the way you've helped other people is astonishing. And I'm really,
thank you.
I'm so happy we met in that elevator. I can't tell you.
I know. Me too. So, if people want to know more about your work and stuff, how can they find you?
Okay. Well, LinkedIn is sort of my place. Follow me on LinkedIn. I publish on LinkedIn all the time. I have a newsletter there also. I think that's the best place. You can follow me on Instagram if you'd like to see pictures of my dogs. And I put up a lot of reels where I sort of give advice every day. So I think Instagram and LinkedIn are the ways to stay in touch with me. And I'd love to hear from you. I really would. It's a great joy of my work is hearing from people. So feel free.
Lovely. So thank you, Suzy, for this amazing nearly an hour that you graciously gave to my audience. I know that they are very appreciative as well, like I am. So hopefully we get to talk to each other soon again.
Alrighty, that's all for this week, my friends. If you love this episode, don't forget to like it, love it, share it. And if you would like to have more inspiring guests like Suzy, and maybe called Suzy, just kidding, on my podcast, comment on this episode and maybe suggest whom you would want me to talk to in one of the future episodes, and even give me a tip what you would want us to talk about. As always, you can find the written version with supporting links on modernemployerbrand.com/podcast145. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching, as this interview has been posted as a video on my YouTube channel. Want to watch it? Easiest way is to go to the modernemployerbrand.com/podcast145 page and find it there. And do not forget to follow me on YouTube. I'm really new there and I don't have lots of followers, but I'll be posting more on YouTube if somebody wants to see it. So, yeah, that's Stella. She also says bye-bye. Until next week, moi moi.